Good afternoon. Russia has been delivering on its commitments in supporting the reconciliation process in Syria. Since October, 163 towns and villages have joined the ceasefire. Currently, the total number is 853. The roads and objects of infrastructure and hospitals are being restored. Electricity is back. That means that the conditions to restore lives are back to normal. And these are towns and villages with more than 2 million people. 34,000 people have gone back to their villages, and this trend is continuing. Together with the Syrian government, we're taking steps to stabilize the situation in the eastern part of Aleppo. For the 10th day, within the 10-kilometer zone around the city, Russia has suspended, and Syria has suspended its air raids. Despite this, the situation has remained tense. Over the past 3 days, the terrorists have opened fire from what they call the Hell Machine 62 times, killing 63 and wounding 96 civilians. On October the 26th, they shelled a school, killing 3 school children and wounding 15. On the 27th of October, 3 mines hit a school, killing 12 civilians, including 3 school children, and wounding 14, including 10 school children. The fire was conducted from the territory held by Jabhat al-Nusra and another territory held by Jaish al-Islam from the so-called moderate opposition, controlled by the US. We urge all the international organizations to come to Aleppo to conduct an investigation into these incidents. In line with the US-Russian agreements, within 7 days, the ceasefire regime was in place. Syrian and Russian forces stopped airstrikes on illegal armed gangs, despite the territory, except for the territories controlled by ISIS. The US, however, did not deliver on any commitments, and the armed groups controlled by them, after regrouping, resumed hostilities. We informed you about the reasons of the failure to follow through the Geneva commitments. Today, groups of terrorists, using the 10-day ceasefire, regained their combat readiness and tried to break through to the eastern part of the city. The offensive was conducted by 3 groups to the west of Aleppo. They were supported by 15 tanks, by 20 tanks and 15 APCs, and they also supported their offensive with artillery fire. And the Gags from Eastern Fire staged a offensive near the humanitarian corridor that led to multiple casualties among civilians and the government forces. All the attacks were repelled. 8 tanks and 5 APCs have been destroyed. We see that terrorists have resumed their hostilities, and so we've urged the Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Armed Forces to give permission to resume airstrikes in eastern Aleppo. Despite the difficult situation, the Russian Reconciliation Center, together with the administration of Aleppo, continue negotiations with the local authorities in the eastern part of the city and a number of armed groups in an attempt to evacuate civilians and the militants. All the 8 humanitarian corridors are open and work 24/7. There are ambulances nearby. You have places where you can have a meal and water. As you can see, we are taking every measure to move the situation to normal. We are ready to consider any new measures, including the introduction of humanitarian pauses, but they should not be used just by terrorists to achieve their goals. To implement the UN plan to evacuate the ill and wounded, there was a lull introduced for 3 days previously. The Syrian government forces stopped their fire, and the UN could have conducted its humanitarian operation. And the government forces pulled away from 2 humanitarian groups, and that ensured the evacuation of militants. Russia has taken every measure for this. However, the local authorities of Eastern Aleppo and the illegal armed groups did not provide the lists of the ill and wounded to the UN, and said they would not be able to provide safety and security of the operation. The failure of the operation was poor organization on the part of the UN and lack of leverage over opposition by the US and other stakeholders. Despite this, we are ready to continue with breaks and ceasefire. We're now working with the US and Middle Eastern countries to introduce more proposals to relieve the situation near Aleppo. We hope that these new proposals will be made public. Every country needs to be personally responsible for the commitments. Today, we continue to receive allegations of indiscriminate airstrikes. But for 10 days, there have been no air raids, and there are still attempts to fabricate news of airstrikes in other parts of Syria, like in the school of Idlib. It's fabricated. This is an attempt to divert the attention of the international community from the war atrocities committed by the US-led coalition. We continue to follow the events near Mosul. And there was an airstrike on a school between the 21st and 23rd of October. And there were a number of airstrikes killing 63 civilians and wounding more than 200. This slide gives you footage of the school in the southern part of Mosul. To the left, you can see the image of the school made on the 7th of September, before the bombardment took place. And to the right, you can see the ruins of the school after the airstrike on the 22nd of October. And you see holes which are 17 meters wide. 2 buildings have been almost completely destroyed. The next slide gives you the area of the school in the settlement of Hazna. You can see the destruction that was inflicted. The other images give you the consequences of airstrikes on the town of Karakosh. The northern part saw a destruction of a building near a church building. Here are the results of the bombardments by the US-led coalition in the central part of the city. Next on, you have the city of Ashura, before and after the US made its airstrikes. At least 5 guided missiles were launched, and 6 buildings have been significantly destroyed. We have provided this information to the mass media. We hope that the US will deliver on its commitments and conduct an objective and unbiased investigation into these incidents. There has been fresh evidence of strikes by the US-led coalition on civilian objects. On the 24th of October, near Tel Kaiv, 14 kilometers away from Mosul, planes hit a school. There are wounded and killed. The strikes have intensified in this area, including with the use of B-52 strategic bombers. As you know, these planes do not provide for precision strikes, which means that the number of casualties will only increase. We will provide more data going forward. Thank you.